About a year ago, I began working on my first 3D printed rotary engine, a humble air-powered Wankel design. And this little engine surprisingly ended up working pretty well. So well, in fact, that Integza took some inspiration and made his own version of it, which I then integrated into an admittedly quite terrible boat. And so if you thought that'd be the end of it, you'd be oh so wrong. This is my air-powered 3D printed liquid piston rotary engine. This tiny engine has the potential to not just be more powerful than both of the previous Wankels, but also more efficient, something I'll now be able to test, but that's for later. The design is pretty simple, and best of all, it's just really fascinating to watch in motion. As you may have guessed, designing this engine was not easy. I thought my previous experiences would have helped, but honestly it only made things harder. Knowing all the weaknesses of my original design meant I tried to resolve them all here, and I may have bitten off a bit more than I could chew. But before diving in, I'd like to thank Wondrium for sponsoring this video. There's no denying that the absolute greatest skill any person can have is the ability to learn, whether it be about interesting history like World War II, practical skills like making bread, or something you didn't even think you wanted to learn more about, like bubbles. Wondrium has an extensive collection of carefully curated short and long form videos. They offer tutorials and how-tos, travel guides, documentaries, and more presented in a thoughtful and relentlessly entertaining manner. I personally found their video about the science of Formula 1 cars absolutely mind-blowing. I had always known these cars were marvels of engineering, but I never could have imagined all of the history and the intricate details that make these vehicles work so well. If you've ever wondered about, well, anything, they have you covered. Wondrium is going to be your new favorite place. And if you click my link in the description or visit wondrium.com/3dprintedlife, you'll get access to a free trial of their service. Show your support for my channel and support for your brain by signing up today, and prepare to be amazed with just how engaging learning is with Wondrium. Now back to the video. Alright, let's get started with the question on everybody's mind. What the heck is a liquid piston engine? Well, you might not have heard of it because it's actually a relatively new design. It's only publicly existed for the past 10 years or so, and it's still in the prototype stages. But this is not going to stop me from attempting to build my own. This engine has two pretty big improvements over the Wankel engine that I'm interested in. One is an even higher energy to weight ratio, and two, a more reliable, less oil hungry engine, though in this case it'd be grease. Now the easiest way to think of how this engine works is actually as an inside-out Wankel. That probably doesn't make any sense, but stick with me here. With a Wankel rotary engine, you have an oval-shaped housing and a triangular-shaped rotor. As the rotor spins around, it creates these compressing and expanding pockets. Well, with the liquid piston engine, the housing is the triangle and the rotor is the oval. You still end up with these contracting and expanding regions, but you'll notice now that there's 3 of them instead of 2, meaning more power per revolution. But more importantly, the sealing situation is so much easier. On a Wankel, these expanding and contracting regions are constantly circumventing around the perimeter of the housing. On a liquid piston, they stay pretty much stationary. Also, the apex seals live on the housing instead of the rotor. Both of these just make sealing a much easier task. Here's my first prototype. Obviously, this version is so far from operational. It was really just a proof of concept. Everything fit together pretty well, so now it's time to actually finish up the CAD and build up the first real engine. And here it is, complete with spring-loaded apex seals and a valveless intake design. And while it did not run, it was far from a total failure. If you listen and watch closely, you can see that one half of the rotor is actually working. It's successfully containing the pressure and creating some power output. You can tell by the little pop it makes instead of a hiss as the rotor spins around. But unfortunately, a combination of too high engine friction, only half the rotor working, and a very non-optimal intake timing meant that this engine would not self-sustain. Plus, the intake adapter was very, very leaky, so it's time for an upgrade. This next version was a huge overhaul of the valve system. These new valves provide more air to each chamber as it spins around, plus they should hold the pressure for longer. But to understand how this works, I should probably explain how the air intake on this engine works in the first place. Air is of course entering through this hose into the head plate here. Through some internal ducting, it is directed towards these 3 holes. Now each of these holes lines up with another hole on the rotor itself, and they only line up at a specific point in the rotor's motion. Now when they do line up, this will allow air to pass from the head through the rotor through the internal ducting and into the chamber, where the air can then expand, push against the rotor, and advance it further. Now once the rotor advances far enough, it will expose this second port on the rotor. This port vents through the rotor and out the back of the housing, and this acts as a way to release the air pressure and allow the engine to compress on the next cycle. So what did I change for this version? Well, the most critical part of this valve system is the interface between the head and the top of the rotor. Originally, I used an O-ring first for both sealing and springiness, with a plastic disc on top to push against the rotor. But this is the problem. Once the rotor advances past the intake, that same port that is used to send air into the chamber is now allowing air to escape. So I switched over to this triangular valve plate. It's constantly being pressed against the rotor, ensuring that the port in the rotor remains sealed even after air has been added. So I went ahead and built up this prototype with the new feature and a bunch of other changes. Unfortunately, a small lapse in brain function led to this fantastic moment. Luckily, a relatively easy fix, but even after the repair, the engine just had way too much friction. And the next version with some minor tweaks didn't do any better. At least I got this failure in high speed. Now you've definitely noticed by now that this engine is not using O-rings for any sealing of the surfaces. It does use them for the compression of the valve plate and as a spring for the seals, but nowhere on any of the sliding contact points. This was intentional, of course. I was worried that O-rings on plastic would add unnecessary friction, so instead I've been relying on very precise tolerances and flat, smooth surfaces to achieve good sealing. While the parts straight off the printer are pretty flat, they are far from perfect. So, for every single one of these prototypes, I meticulously sand all the mating and sealing surfaces on a 123 block, which I'm using as a flat reference surface, going from 150 grit down to a 3000 grit wet sand. The result is an impressively smooth and translucent surface, which looks really good, but it's just crazy difficult to get these tolerances right by hand. Anyway, for this next version, I decided to give O-rings a try. And they looked pretty promising, but I just didn't spend enough time cleaning up the O-ring grooves, and that resulted in this bulge, so that's not gonna work. So for the next design, I just went back to the original tolerance-based design. I included a few more improvements to the valve location, the plate design, the tooth profile, and so on, but nada. So I made a few more tweaks. I added more O-rings as support to the valve plate. I redesigned the apex seals to lower the spring constant, hopefully improve the sealing and reduce the force, and this time I spent, not even kidding, 3 hours making sure I sanded everything as perfectly as possible, constantly measuring parts. All these parts ended up within about plus or minus 25 microns on all the critical surfaces from what I wanted them, which is ridiculous and painful to do by hand, and still nothing. I do have a few theories on why this is. The resin is quite a bit softer than the other plastics, so I think that as the very smooth surfaces come in close contact, they might actually be adding way more friction than I'm expecting here. Not to mention, I lost a whole week of progress because, as it turns out, the resin I bought changed their formula, and you're supposed to expose it for twice as long now. I still have plenty more ideas of things to try. The next version brings back the O-ring rotor, plus I'm trying a new strategy for the valve head plate sealing. But to see how this version works, you're gonna have to wait for part 2. Moving on, I built a dynamometer, more commonly known to most people as a dyno. A dyno is a way to measure power output of a rotating shaft by measuring both the torque and the rotational speed throughout the engine cycle. This design is simple. It was inspired by Integza. The torque is measured by using this bar and varying the clamping force on the shaft of the flywheel. This 50mm long bar then presses onto a load cell, which is being recorded by this microcontroller. But we are still missing one part, and that is the speed of the shaft. For that, I'm using a 600 pulse per revolution quadrature encoder. This means that I get insanely high resolution data. Is it overkill? Yes. Do I care? Then using a bit of math, I'm able to calculate and plot the torque and the power output of the motor over a run. First, let's give Tom Stanton's tried and true air engine a go. This engine runs so well and for so long, I'm expecting some pretty good results here. But shockingly, the engine has so little power that it just wasn't able to run on my setup, even at the minimum friction setting. I know its engine works better upside down, so I gave that a try too. And I also then discovered a small failure, which definitely increased the friction. But still, even after fixing that, it just didn't have enough power. It's definitely a fault of my setup, not the engine, so let's jump to another engine I know has enough power. This is Integza's Wankel engine. Now I expect reasonable torque here, and it probably will spin for a reasonable amount of time as well thanks to the regulator. Not bad, but what happens if I remove the regulator? Whoa, so that actually spun up so quickly that my shaft coupler slipped. Probably. Either that, or it just spun faster than this encoder can actually handle, which was definitely a hazard of using such a cheap and high-resolution encoder. And now for my original Wankel engine. I already know this is going to spin faster than the encoder can handle, but why not run it anyway? And yeah, it was too fast. But look at the grease fly. Not to worry though, I do have a backup plan. I tried using these IR emitter and receiver modules I had, which would trigger whenever a spoke of the flywheel interrupted the beam, but these sensors were duds, so that didn't work out. I did order some optical limit switches, which are commonly used on 3D printers, to use instead, and then a blizzard came and delayed the parts, so this will also have to wait for part 2. But once these changes are up and running, I'll be able to truly evaluate and compare the performance of all 4 of these different era engines. Also in part 2, I'll be making a number of improvements to the Liquid Piston to get it running self-sufficiently, but all that's for next time, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. Like the video if you enjoyed, and leave a comment if you have any tips or project ideas for me. Big thank you to all my Patreons. If you'd like to support, see the link in the description below. Until next time.